This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 7th part of What If Naruto Gave Up After Hinata's Death. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto remained silent as he gradually regained consciousness. Instead, he closed his eyes and tensed his muscles. The only thing he did was slightly flare his nostrils, taking in the smells of those around him.
Hokage the Elder, Inoichi, Ibiki, several Anbu, and Hiashi.
Oh no, this was bad. Shinigami sarcastically asked, "What was your first clue?" "You may now open your eyes," Ibiki said. "I know you've awakened." "Of course you would, Ibiki-san," Naruto replied casually. The men around him stiffened at his friendly demeanor. The Namikaze slowly opened his eyes and looked around. His immediate reaction made a strong, positive first impression. Unlike how most people would react in this situation, he was not panicked at all.
Instead, his bright blue eyes moved slowly around the room, seemingly looking straight through them, gathering all the information he could.
Despite being bound and with chakra suppressors painted on his body language gave the impression that he was in command of the situation. Inside, Naruto's thoughts were more along the lines of, "Damn it, damn this overwhelming sense of annoyance was picked up on by Ibiki and the others." He's a dangerous man, Ibiki thought. He was supposed to be unconscious for at least another 2 hours. Before anyone else could react, a furious Hiashi stalked up to Yurei and drove his not-so-gentle fist into Yurei's stomach, ignoring J-Ken. The man in the mask grunted. The reason he remained masked was simple. Naruto's henge actually included the mask. This meant that, despite numerous attempts, they were unable to remove it. What was the point of that? Yurei exclaimed. Haishi's Byakugan was automatically activated. "You threatened my clan," he said quietly and coldly. "That's what I did." "You threatened mine first," Yurei said quietly, deadly. "Wait," Sarutobi said, interrupting. "Did he threaten your clan?" I did," Yurei chuckled. "As well as his own daughter, to which I objected vehemently."
"I thought you'd already be aware of this, Lord Hokage," Hiashi said, his voice puzzled.
"One of my elders told me that he had already informed you of what had happened, and that you had said that we should always remain silent on the subject, in case others learned of Konoha's weakness," Hiashi fumed on the inside. He should not have trusted Horinsa to tell him the truth. He was always one to advocate for the Hyuga clan's superiority. Horinsa, how can you admit such a flaw? He'd rather have gouged out his own eyes. "I'm sorry to say that I did not receive that message, Hiashi." "What exactly did Yurei threaten your clan with?" Hiruzen inquired. "Genocide," Yurei replied casually. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at Yurei, who was leaning back in his chair and staring at the ceiling. The other inmates in the interrogation room looked at the man who had casually mentioned a massacre.
It seemed
ridiculous.
Impossible.
"And you took him seriously?" Inoichi asked, puzzled.
"He had a very strong bargaining position," Hiashi joked.
"What the Hyuga Lord means to say," Yurei interjected, his voice pleasant and conversational, "is that once a person has taken out all of your guards, placed paralysis seals on every other remaining member of the clan, then dragged you around the compound by your hair, stopping only to enter the doors of your clan members and coming out with either a sword or a kunai dripping in red, then shown you the room where he had stuffed all the unmoving bodies of the ones meant to protect you, then you start to believe that he may just be, but his gaze was cold and merciless." Even now, the mere thought of what they had done to Hinata made Naruto furious. "You killed them," the Hokage exclaimed, horrified, even though the more logical side of him knew that such a thing would have been impossible to conceal. Yurei raised his head. No, I didn't kill anyone, and there weren't even any long-term injuries. After all, it was just a threat, and I was just proving that I could. Hiashi smacked Yurei in the face, sending a loud thud through the room. You made me believe my clan was extinct. He roared. And in doing so, Yurei said quietly, I created an opportunity for you to stop being just a clan and become something more, a family. If your daughter knew, she might even thank me. Don't give it to me. I started. Yurei exclaimed, raising his voice and overpowering Hiashi. By forcing you to follow my rules, I started the process of bringing you and your daughter together. Naruto's voice entered Hiashi's head, his words harsh. When did you intend to begin? When your eldest child lay dying on her deathbed after a botched mission, or when she saves a teammate's life at the expense of her own, having spent her entire life believing that her beloved father despises her very existence? I don't regret anything from that night, Yurei interrupted Hiashi's thoughts. However, the real question is, do you? Hiashi struggled internally as he was struck dumb by the question. Did he? Was he truly sorry for what Yurei had done?
Would he have preferred not to have done anything?
Hinata appeared to him, her face pressed into him, her arms not quite wrapped all the way around his waist. She was smiling, one of the brightest he'd seen in years. No, he said quietly. I don't regret it at all, Yurei said, his approving smile visible behind the mask. Surprisingly, he heard Uzumaki's voice again, and Hiashi knew that after his vocal confession, this would be the last time he heard it in this way, at least for a while. It's almost bloody time. Then you understand what I was trying to teach you. This statement was met with silence before Hiashi simply huffed and walked back to the rest of the group. He had a lot on his mind. The men and women around him just stared, but Inoichi, unable to sit still, stood up and began pacing around the room. What kind of man were they up against? They were apparently dealing with a man who would attempt to unite a fractured clan by simply instilling a common fear and a set of rules to follow. Who are you? Anbu Cat inquired, morbidly fascinated as well as professionally curious. Yurei shook his head and smiled. I've been asked that question a lot lately, and I'll give you the same answer I gave your Hokage, no one of importance. One of my elders suspected he was a Namikaze, Hiashi admitted, slightly hesitantly. They were correct in that, Hiruzen confirmed. If Yurei is to be believed. The third made a slight motion with his hand as he said this. Inoichi, who had quietly made his way behind Yurei, approached him almost silently, his hand stretched out, reaching for his head. However, when dealing with Naruto's enhanced hearing, almost soundless was simply insufficient. I wouldn't do that, Inoichi-san, Naruto said calmly, not even turning his head to acknowledge the Yamanaka clan head. But you're not me, are you? Inoichi asked boldly, his surprise visible as he grasped the Namikaze's skull and entered his mind. It's going to get really crowded in there, was Naruto's last, unheard thought before passing out. Oof. Grunted Inoichi as he face planted into the bottom of what appeared to be a sewer, sending a large splash of water everywhere. He groaned and dragged himself to his feet, absent-mindedly wondering if his nose had been broken yet again. The first time was when he first met Shuza. He was unaware of the forbidden word at the time. Tsunade was still in Konoha at the time, which was fortunate. She had found the incident amusing and had laughed about it with Dan. Inoichi froze, bringing his rambling mind to a halt. Something wasn't right. Slowly, he took in his surroundings. He was in another person's mind, and the very laws of his technique meant that the user's own mind was supposed to be unable to wander. This could be extremely harmful to one's health. The fact that he had done so completely unconsciously meant that he was in something he had never truly expected to see, despite having read about it. He was in a mindscape, but not just any mindscape. He was in a mindscape that the subject was both aware of and used on a regular basis. This meant that there was a chance that this mind had some kind of defenses. Inoichi tightened his grin, something resembling excitement welling up within him. He was the undisputed mental inspector of Konoha, a past master of his clan's techniques. He hadn't faced a true challenge in his field in a long time. Whatever happened, he'd probably enjoy this. Breathing deeply, it was only through his now iron self-control that he didn't wonder why he felt the need to breathe despite being a completely incorporeal form inside a man's skull. The mind reader took in the details of the sights around him methodically. The water that covered the floor as far as the eye could see only reached mid-calf, which is probably why it didn't stop his unexpected fall. He was in a passageway or tunnel that was about 11 feet wide and the same height. However, the ceiling above his head had several pipes running along its length. These reduced the height of the ceiling to the point where Inoichi had to duck his head at times. The passage behind him seemed to go on forever, and the same was true in front of him. Torches were placed at regular intervals along the path, their flames crackling audibly. The only thing keeping the darkness at bay was the flickering light they provided. Inoichi thoughtfully chewed his lower lip. The simple question that needed to be answered was, which way did he go? He had a choice between two paths. One that would take him back to the memories he craved. The other would have him searching for hours in vain. Inoichi concentrated, closing his eyes and trying to feel something, anything. And he sensed a hidden darkness in front of him, a darkness that weighed on Yurei's soul. That is the best place to begin. Inoichi nodded and took a step forward, having made up his mind. The torches around him immediately flared up, the fire burning an all-consuming bright orange color. Inoichi could just make out the ceiling above him disappearing as those conflagrations stretched up, clawing at the heavens themselves, before the sight burned at his retina, temporarily blinding him. Inoichi opened his eyes again, blinking quickly. Everything had returned to normal. The torches continued to crackle happily. Almost innocently, Inoichi thought suspiciously as he moved forward with caution. There was no action. Inoichi stepped forward again, sighing in relief. Suddenly, every single torch was extinguished, leaving Inoichi waiting in a sewer in complete darkness. Crap, Inoichi summed it up nicely. Are you sure this is a good idea, Arlia? Hinata asked her friend as she used the tree-walking technique to reach the roof of the Hyuga Elders' council room. Of course it is, honey. I didn't like that dirty old man's expression, so we're going to spy on them and see what they're up to. Hinata shrugged as she drew a practice kunai and, with surprising skill, opened the window and crept into the attic, closing the window behind her. Keep to the main support beams, honey, Arlia said absently before continuing her conversation. After all, in order for them to get off their buttocks. Arlia-sama. Hinata chided gently, having grown accustomed to the goddess's eccentricities. I'm so sorry, dear. In order for them to get off their asses, she said emphatically, a smile tugging at the corner of Hinata's mouth. And organize something like this, especially for that old fart Horansa, and especially during a storm, when all those old bones of theirs will be full of pain and aches. Suckers. You don't need to rub it in, Arlia, just because you don't get old. Surprisingly, Hinata had quickly become the moderator of Arlia's more rash habits. The surprising thing was that she was able to do so with some success. Gomen, Gomen, mumbled Arlia. But the clincher is that they've done all of this while your father is out of the compound, which should set off alarm bells in your head. Hinata agreed with her privately. That was why she was doing something a little out of character for her and was actually spying on the elders. The Byakugan couldn't see through the ceiling because of their own inflated sense of paranoia, which meant Hinata was perfectly hidden. However, this worked both ways, as Hinata was now forced to rely solely on her hearing in order to gather information. There was only one issue. Hinata, can you hear anything? Nothing at all. Arlia cursed. Hinata, on the other hand, was engaged in productive activity. She fiddled with her kunai pouch, drawing a simple storage scroll and unsealing its contents to reveal a plain drinking glass. Dear? Hinata ignored her boarder and pressed the glass firmly against the wooden ceiling before resting her ear on the base. How did you find out about that? Arlia inquired, surprised. Hinata raised an eyebrow at her mentally. Alright, Naruto, stupid question. Hinata suddenly became aware of the conversation, allowing her to comprehend what was being said. Takashi asked, his voice cracking at the end of his words, are you insane? Horinsa spoke up, his voice rough. Are you? We have the perfect opportunity right now to right the wrong that has been done to us. Takashi let out a snort. I'm not sure about that. What assurance do you have that Yurei is in prison? Arlia exclaimed, the problem with staying inside a person is that you're no longer aware of. Well, everything. It was one of the things Arlia found appealing about her situation. But now it was just exasperating. Hinata approached Arlia. Naruto was said to have persuaded her clan to apologize. As a result, he was most likely the one who'd committed the wrong against the Hyuga. Did this mean Naruto-kun was in prison? Arlia, is Naruto-kun in trouble? Hinata inquired, speaking to the goddess silently, their conversation as quick as thought. If he isn't, he will be, Arlia replied solemnly. Is Naruto Yurei? What has he done to my clan? She wondered, worried about her friend and crush. Arlia struggled to think of a way to tell Hinata exactly what Naruto did without making her fearful of him. It would not be in her best interests to obstruct the progression of this relationship. Naruto being. Well, Naruto was a sufficient barrier in and of itself. When Horinsa angrily responded to Takashi, the conversation below them continued. An Anbu from the Hokage himself came and told Hiashi that a man named Yurei was in custody and asked him to accompany them to Interrogation Room 3. Takashi frowned. It appears that Yurei is imprisoned, but are you willing to take the risk? Yes, Horinsa said emphatically. Another pause in the conversation below them allowed Arlia to respond to Hinata's question. Naruto, while posing as Yurei, played a prank on your clan, a prank that, while no one was seriously hurt, was still one of the most terrifying I have ever witnessed, and in doing so, he managed to open them up to the prospect of being not just clan folk, but kinfolk as well. Remember, Takashi cautioned, he's a Namikaze, and the man could just be testing us. If he was testing us, he'd be testing Hiashi as well, because we all faced him in that room together, or don't you remember? The person who answered him this time was a woman, but Hinata couldn't tell who it was because her voice was too strangled as she spat the words at Takashi. Takashi, the council's youngest member, only a few years older than Hiashi, snorted. I remember everything that happened that night, Ba-chan. He mockingly exclaimed. I recall waking up in my own room, unable to move. We're not supposed to talk about it, Horinsa hissed loudly. The council had put in place numerous safeguards to ensure that no one in the Hyuga clan knew how badly they had been humiliated as elders and as a clan. The most fundamental was that they were not to discuss the event at all. Takashi was breaking the rule now, at least in part. I remember, he continued, his voice rising above the usual stoic dignity befitting a Hyuga, seeing a man bend over my body towards my wife with a knife in hand while I could do nothing. I remember the trip to the dojo. I remember each stop on the way here. Did you know that my eldest son was a guard that night? And I remember you, old woman, pissing yourself in fear when Yurei unleashed his ki. Horinsa flushed furiously. This was the source of his rage. He had always believed in the superiority of the Hyuga, as well as his own superiority. He considered himself a great man, deserving of the title clan chief. Yurei had crushed the ideals he had built his entire life on in one fell swoop. He had thought himself to be an unrivaled ninja, until this man appeared and literally killed him with a look. In all his life, he had never felt such deep-seated, fervid, powerful, all-consuming fear, horror, as he had when he looked into those cold eyes that kept flickering from blue to red, flaying his very soul. His heart had simply stopped beating. Horinsa had willed his heart to stop in order to escape the scourge of terror. Even so, Yurei had unfeelingly proven to be his superior, callously restarting his heart with nothing more than his own two hands, rather than some medical technique. On Yurei's whim, he'd died. Yurei had brought him back on a whim. He was his total and complete inferior. Horinsa had never felt so weak. Hinata was entirely to blame. But, most unexpectedly, Takashi continued. I remember feeling guilty as Yurei told us about what we had done to Hinata. Takashi's divisive remark elicited gasps from the entire room. Hinata had clapped her hand over her mouth in the rafters, scolding herself for her outburst but also amazed at the support she was receiving from one of the elders. So, Horinsa hissed, his words choking out. You'd side with that jerk out of what? Pity? Responsibility? Guilt? We always do what's best for the clan. We always have and we always will. I'm not just doing this for Hinata. I'm doing it for the clan as well. Takashi snarled. This statement was met with stunned silence. Hinata sighed above his head. I figured it was too much to ask for one of these. Say it. Arlia encouraged. To have one of these old farts actually back me up. Didn't that feel good? Arlia asked, smiling. Yes, Hinata admitted grudgingly, almost. Liberating, she added guiltily. They grow up so quickly, Arlia lamented. The pause had come to an end down below. Go on, Takashi, a soft voice said, causing Hinata to strain her ears to hear him. How does this benefit our clan? Hinata has shown a remarkable improvement across the board since that night. Takashi responded instantly. Yes, Horinsa, he stated loudly to the man, who had given a tremendous snort. Even you cannot deny that. If she continues to grow, she may one day make a worthy heir. And yes, he added, apparently satisfied with the large intake of breath that this declaration had caused, yes, I did just say that. But that is all in the long run. Horinsa was the one who finally broke the awkward silence. Your concern has been noted, Takashi, but the votes have already been cast, and you are vastly outnumbered. Hyuga Hinata will be branded with the caged bird seal in 10 minutes. Hinata froze, bile rising to the back of her throat as she spoke. Arlia yelled angrily. Takashi replied calmly, no. She will not be. Excuse me? Horinsa asked, puzzled. I will not. There was the unmistakable sound of a J-Ken strike being deflected, followed by another, before the unmistakable sound of it impacting solidly against flesh and protests filled the area. Horinsa yelled angrily, "You will concede." There was no longer any reason to use the glass. Takashi appeared to be laughing in Horinsa's face. "Well, it can't happen now, can it?" Takashi laughed. "You just sealed all the chakra in my arm, and in case you forgot, I'm the Hyuga seal master. The only other person alive who knows how to make the cage bird seal is Hiashi himself." "That just means the seal isn't perfect," Horinsa explained in a silky smooth voice. Hinata's face flushed as she struggled to maintain consciousness after hearing that voice. The only times she'd been more terrified were when Kumo kidnapped her and when Horinsa threatened Naruto-kun. You can't," Takashi exclaimed. "I believe you were the one who painted the seal on your youngest child's head." Horinsa's voice became hushed. Takashi exclaimed involuntarily, his speech tortured. Horinsa's cruel laugh followed Hinata, ringing in her ears and giving her fearful wings as she slipped out the window and ran for her freedom. He had been walking for what seemed like hours. This man's mind was a maze, completely illogical at times and always unpredictable. He hadn't found anything about the man yet, and it didn't help that he was still walking in complete darkness. The only thing that kept drawing him in, acting as a beacon to him, was that sense of wrongness, of darkness. And he was getting close to it now. He was finally within sight of the stigma that had drawn him in like a moth to a flame. It was here that he discovered Yurei's astral form. The man's wrists and ankles were chained between two massive bars, his feet dangling high off the ground. A soft glow emanated from him, reflecting off the filthy water beneath him, causing Inoichi to blink in the midst of the constant darkness. Inoichi sighed with relief when he saw the chains. Finally, something had gone right. The seals and defensive measures installed in Interrogation Room 3 had, at the very least, kept Yurei mentally confined. "Hello up there," exclaimed Inoichi. Yurei's bound head snapped up, and he looked up, startled, at Inoichi. Yamanaka's head smirked. "Did you not expect me to get this far?" He laughed. "Come no further," Yurei yelled, and Inoichi detected the faintest hint of panic in his voice for the first time. The Mind Master snorted and took a step forward, only to leap back as the floor seemed to shift and explode into spikes. Inoichi whistled long and low. "You have a very strong will, to be able to instinctively bend your own mindscape to its whim. I'll bet you were the one to turn off all those torches and you didn't even realize it, did you?" Yurei's silence was all the response Inoichi required. "Whatever you're hiding, you must really want to keep me away from it," Inoichi pondered before darting forward before Yurei could react, and he was in. He'd gotten through the bars. Now all he had to do was figure out what the man was hiding. "You fool," Yurei said softly, lowering his head to his chest and sighing in defeat. "I wasn't attempting to keep it away from you. Rather, I was attempting to keep you away from it." Inoichi looked at Yurei, puzzled, and saw the sewer waters rise up from their resting place, heaping upon one another before solidifying into something resembling crystal. Inoichi's attention was drawn to the ceiling by a flickering red light high above him. A bubbling, blood-colored syrup appeared to be leaking from an unnoticed crack in the ceiling. A single drop of it fell down, its glowing light catching the eye before it splattered into the water below with a sizzle as steam rose from the surface. The roiling scarlet mass ate away at the ceiling above, opening itself up to an endless black maw high above that stretched on into infinity, its only feature a single pinprick of bright orange light. That small perforation of light was the first thing visible through the hole where the red substance was coming from, and it gradually grew larger even as more of the blackness of the void was revealed as the ceiling was eaten away. Soon, the ceiling had almost vanished, and it dawned on a terrified Inoichi that the light was not growing larger, but rather falling. A pillar of fire was hurtling towards him, the fire collected from the hundreds, if not thousands, of torches that had once illuminated this man's mind. Inoichi threw his arms up above his head in a futile attempt to protect himself just before impact. However, the flames approached at an angle and collided with an object that was still tens of feet above the ground, somehow remaining in darkness despite the blinding illumination provided by the firestorm. Inoichi watched, terrified, as the flames washed quickly over the object, no, the being in front of him, revealing its massive frame to his eyes. A fox lay there, resplendent in his orange, gold, and dark garment, blood red as the inferno from above pranced over his form, each of his 9 tails coated in a different shade of fire, his eyes a glowing scarlet. Slowly, the Kyuubi rose to his feet, stretching as if waking from a pleasant nap, his eyes closed, his fur lit with the fire of hell itself, but he remained unburned. The great fox yawned, and his cage was filled with flame, flame that danced across the surface of the water, flame that crawled over the walls and climbed into the air, leaving only a small half-circle of refuge around Inoichi created by the strength of decades worth of protective seals and jutsu that had been layered into the room Inoichi's body resided in again and again. Despite this, Inoichi could feel the insatiable heat of those flames, the fiercest of which came from the dark orange of Kyuubi's own flesh, and the man knew that the slightest flex of the demon in front of him would expose his mind and soul to the fox's touch, to its every whim. "Don't hurt him too badly, Fuzzbutt," Urei yelled, the chains holding him in place glowing a brilliant cherry red as more and more power was required to protect Inoichi. As Inoichi cowered in terror beneath the small percentage of killing intent that made its way through Inoichi's shields, Kyuubi bent his massive head towards him, cocking it so that he could look him in the eye with one blood-red eye. Kyuubi opened his jaws and roared, as if he had an opinion about him. Kyuubi's breath roiled throughout his cage, raising the flames to their highest point yet. As all available power was used to protect the clan head, Urei's chains melted abruptly, dripping harmlessly off his wrists and sending him to the floor. Symbols sprang up all around Inoichi, glowing in a bright, silver light before shattering into innumerable pieces with the sound of bells ringing. The Yamanaka could smell Kyuubi's fetid breath and feel its damp warmth on his skin. Inoichi could finally feel the heat of the flames and hear a voice throughout the cage, one whose icy coldness created a terrifying contrast to the fieriness of his body as the seals failed, unable to hold against the demon's mere voice. "Blood so pretty, blood so sweet. Find the blood, drink the blood, and crack the marrow. The prey has come to us. Hear the screams, little and loud, pretty screams. Scream for us precious. Scream." Inoichi screamed as fire and death came for him, reaching out with terrible, clenched fingers. A fist smashed through the crystal structure between the cage's bars, where Inoichi had pressed himself in a futile attempt to get as far away from danger as possible. The hand grabbed hold of his coat and tore him through the once impenetrable wall, throwing him to the ground behind him. The fire smashed against the cage's bars, sending flames of 100 different colors high into the air, blending and combining to create an amazing display. Despite the fact that the same inferno was almost the cause of his death, Inoichi could only think of one word. "Beautiful," he exclaimed, before flinching as the great fox howled in rage at his escaping prey. Inoichi was hauled to his feet, barely able to move, and found himself staring into Urei's cold, angry, stony gaze. "Get the fuck out of my head," he simply said before slamming his forehead into Inoichi's nose, expelling him from his mind. It came as a huge surprise to those who had been locked inside Interrogation Room 3 for the previous 1.5 hours. After Inoichi had been in the same position for more than 20 minutes, the Hokage checked Inoichi's vitals to make sure he was okay. Fortunately, everything appeared to be fine. However, as time passed, everyone became increasingly concerned. Suddenly, the room's seals shattered, and Inoichi flew violently away from Yurei, only to be caught by one of the surrounding Anbu and propelled both of them into the wall with enough force to send a spider web of cracks running through it. Inoichi lay on top of the Anbu's groaning form, her eyes so wide that the whites could be seen all around her. He was hyperventilating and looking around the room frantically to ensure his safety. The others' gazes were drawn to Yurei, whose sapphire gaze regarded them all equally. He twisted his head to the left and right lazily, cracking his neck. "What happened?" Hiruzen demanded, his voice as sharp as a whip. Yurei shook his head. "Inoichi-san has just discovered what happens when you enter a Jinchuriki's mind. Hinata's first action was to shield Higashi. She would not allow the child to be punished, no matter what happened. She could try to flee the compound, but now that the elders had finished their meeting, the first thing they would do is notify the guards that she should be arrested. She'd given up any chance of doing so the moment she decided to protect Higashi. Had she, or hadn't she? "Arlia, could you lend me a hand?" she inquired. "Who are you talking to, Hinata-sama?" Higashi inquired. "My invisible friend," Hinata said, a little nervously. "Oh, you have one as well?" Higashi inquired brightly. Yes, I do, Higashi," Hinata replied, smiling. "Arlia," she reasoned. "Can you help me?" "Just a second, dear. I'm in the middle of swearing up a storm," Arlia said, her voice slightly icy. "You mean you can't help me?" Hinata asked, a sinking feeling in her stomach. "Of course I'm going to help you," exclaimed Arlia. "Who does that old man think he is, threatening you with sealing? Blackmailing the only elder who appears halfway decent with hurting his youngest daughter. I should storm in there and give him such a—" "Wait," Hinata said, interrupting. Arlia was taken aback by this and abruptly ended her rant. "You mentioned storm twice now. Can you make the storm worse?" Hinata inquired. "And if so, could you assist me in getting through it?" Arlia's face broke into a slow grin. "I'm afraid I can't, honey. That's outside the scope of my expertise, but I know someone who can." Despite having Higashi with her, Arlia left Hinata's mind, leaving her feeling almost lonely. She planned to pay a visit to Susanoo, an old friend of hers. A god would never normally submit to the whims of another. However, Arlia had a few advantages over Susanoo. For starters, she was never normal. Shinigami was her husband, and he was a jealous one at that. 3. Susanoo had once peeked on her in the middle of a shower in a drunken dare. Jiraiya himself can attest to the fact that a beating administered by an enraged husband can outperform one administered by the husband's wife. That was certainly the case when Minato thrashed him for admiring Kushina's feminine form. There was also Arlia's father's case to consider. Unfortunately for Susanoo, Shinigami had discovered his transgression first. The storm god had fled to Kami himself, admitted his crime, and gladly submitted to his divine wrath not even halfway through his beating. It was far gentler than Shinigami's demonic rage. One of the worst things about angering the death god is that no matter what he does to you, you can't even wish you were dead, because not only would he grant your wish, but you'd be even more firmly in his grasp, in the heart of his own realm where, frankly, he could do whatever the hell he wanted to you. Susanoo had effectively become Arlia's minion until Shinigami forgave him and rescinded his threats. She only had to threaten to flash him, wait for him to stop drooling and realize what that would mean for his health, and voila, one storm god pleading for mercy. Hinata only had to spend about 5 to 10 minutes dodging her clan while Arlia sorted things out, hashing out the details, making sure that no one got killed in the storm, which Hinata did not want on her conscience. Arlia, on the other hand, made it clear that she didn't mind Horensa being struck by lightning, not at all. To ensure that no one died, Arlia had to pay a quick visit back home, where she told her husband's shadow clone that no one in Konoha would die that night from the storm. Arlia was impressed with Hinata after she returned and realized how much time had passed. Although it may not appear to be much, dodging almost an entire clan while dragging along a young 4-year-old girl and keeping her entertained was far from easy. Arlia attributed her behavior to a lifetime of avoiding and being ignored by them. "Alright," Arlia said in Hinata's head, causing the young lady to jump slightly. "You've got 5 minutes before the storm hits full force. It'll last about 5.5 hours, and you can't get caught in that time. You've got the first 10 minutes as a window to get the hell out of here. After that, you'll have to find shelter. It'll be insane for any normal shinobi to go out in the weather that's going to be going on here." Hinata gave a nod. "Would you like to sleep in my bed tonight, Higashi?" Higashi was awestruck by the celebrity. Hinata's bed was far superior to her own pallet in one of the branch dorms. "May I cuddle Foxy-kun?" she asked, a little shyly. Hinata's brow was marked with a tick mark. She knew it was unreasonable, even silly, but Naruto had always reminded her of a fox, which is why she kept a fox plushie on her bed. And Higashi's request to cuddle was something she wasn't sure she was comfortable with. "Yes, of course you can," she said, shaking her head, "and I'll even make you some tea to help you sleep, MK?" "K," Higashi replied. Hinata left the room 4 minutes later after saying goodnight to Higashi. Higashi jumped out of bed and placed Foxy-kun on Hinata's desk. She couldn't explain it, but Hinata's expression when she asked if she could cuddle the toy was scary. Overall, it was probably best to leave Foxy-kun alone. Hinata crept down the corridor toward the gardens. She should be able to make it over the walls and into Sanctuary once she arrives. If only. Heart Hinata's sank. Horensa and a posse of branch and main house Hyuga stood in front of her. "Hinata Hyuga," Horensa said, rubbing his hands with his own spittle. "It has been decided to brand you with the cage bird seal." Naruto had refused to say anything else after his declaration, which was why he was now being hooked up to a machine that hadn't been used since the Second Shinobi World War. Simply put, it forced people to tell the truth while simultaneously projecting memories of events onto a massive screen. It wasn't used very often because the chakra drain was massive and constant, requiring the prisoner, in this case Naruto, to supply it. Most people would die from the drain, but they reasoned that if Yurei was who he said he was, which Inoichi almost violently attested to, then he should be fine. Hiruzen finally asked the first question after the machine was up and running. "Do you have any plans to harm Konoha?" "No," Yurei replied quickly, causing many to exhale a sigh of relief. "Do you consider yourself a Jinchuriki?" Yes, Naruto's answer came reluctantly, but it came, despite the fact that he had tried to lie with all his might in order to prove that their machine had no power over him. It appears that it did. "What kind of biju do you have?" Everyone in the room tensed as Inoichi muttered a name. "Kyuubi." "Shit," thought Naruto. "What should I do now?" "Tell them the truth, but mislead them as much as you can. I can tinker with some of the images they see, change faces and such, and perhaps offer my own point of view, but I can't change what you say. You've always been good at talking, kid. Let's hope it's enough." "It's not possible," Hiashi stated. "The Kyuubi Jinchuriki is Naruto." Yurei laughed, seemingly ruefully. "So there's no point in hiding it now." I've already told you that I witnessed Kyuubi's defeat. On the screen, an image of the Great Fox appeared, with Shinigami's arm coming for him, hurling his defiance and power against the Death God, and Minato standing proudly in front of the fox. Kushina was by his side, her every line determined, and she was tenderly looking down at the babe they both held, Naruto. Although the shinobi around them were unaware, they were seeing things through Shinigami's eyes. That was the day Minato incorporated Kyuubi into Naruto. But that was not all he did. Minato began by severing Kyuubi in two. Shinigami was shown taking half of Kyuubi's chakra into himself, and it appeared as if the jutsu was being used to seal that half inside a random person. He sealed half of himself into me. The Shiki Fujin was then used on Naruto, but not before Kyuubi used his great claws on both Minato and Kushina. He sealed half of himself into his son. This statement caused an uproar in the room. Naruto? The Yondaimi's son, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? It was impossible, simply impossible, and yet... Yurei! Exclaimed the third. That's an SS-level secret. You're the one who hooked me up to this machine, old man. Remember how it forces me to tell the truth? So I'm being truthful. Hiruzen became quiet as his ninja stared at him. What happened after the seal was broken? Ibiki inquired. Yurei gave him a tight smile. I am obligated to respond to the Hokage, not you, Ibiki. How did you get my name? Ibiki inquired, hoping he'd say something. Yurei gave him a witty look. We've already established that I am related to the fourth, that Minato believed in me more than almost anyone else, and that I was entrusted with a mission that no one else had. Do you honestly believe I wouldn't know the name of Konoha's top interrogation expert? I know a lot of things, Ibiki, and I even know how you got those scars, he said with a chuckle. Ibiki tensed. Almost no one was aware of the full extent of his scars.
How would this man be aware of it?
Yurei cocked his head to the big man. I admire you for what you did that night, so I'm willing to give you some information as a token of respect. The interrogation expert automatically leaned forward. He wasn't about to turn down free information after spending half his life gathering it, especially when there was no chance of it being false. Idate is alive, Yurei stated unequivocally. Ibiki shifted his weight back on his heels, as if striking a physical blow. He had not expected that. What? He exhaled the question. Yurei gave a nod. Yes, I am very much alive and well. From what I understand, he's still working with Tsunade's friend, and he's as quick as ever. That last comment was the clincher for Ibiki. It convinced him that Yurei was indeed talking about his younger brother. Yurei. Hiruzen stated emphatically. You're not here to mess with Ibiki's head. You're here to answer questions. Naruto shrugged and turned back to face the old man. That was, after all, his goal. Ibiki was the most dangerous person in the room to him at the time, even more skilled than Hiashi at detecting deception. But now his mind was too full for him to focus solely on Naruto, which was a relief to him. He struggled to conceal a wry smile, but Sarutobi saw right through it. He still felt a little guilty about it. Ibiki was frightening, but he was also a nice guy. What was the mission Minato assigned to you? That mission will be completed by his son, Yurei said softly. To destroy the person who unleashed Kyuubi on Konoha. An image of the man known as Tobi appeared on the screen, his Sharingan eye visible to all. He's a Uchiha! Exclaimed one of the Anbu. Yurei laughed. Aye, he's a Uchiha. The occupants could all hear the quotation marks in his speech. I've spent the majority of my ninja career chasing an Uchiha. As the machine rebelled against the half-truths Naruto was telling, he could feel a strain. "How come you can't defeat this adversary yourself?" Sarutobi inquired. Yurei raised his head. "I'm Yurei, and I'm a spirit, nothing more than a figment of my imagination. I'm not even a ninja, to be honest. Yurei will soon cease to exist, and Naruto, the last Namikaze, will complete the mission." As he continued to speak in the third person, the strain began to hurt Naruto, and he instinctively pushed more chakra into the device. The tension dissipated. Naruto's eyes blinked. "Wait," Hiashi advised. "You mentioned your name as Yurei. What is your name?" Naruto fell silent, his mouth dry with fear. Shinigami barely managed to stop the image of Naruto's own face from appearing on screen as the machine's compulsion began to act on him, cursing the limitations he had imposed on himself. "What is your name, Yurei?" Sarutobi inquired. The pain became more intense, forcing Naruto to open his mouth. It was completed. He was going to reveal his true identity to them. He'd failed. He was never going to become a ninja. Sasuke would accompany Orochimaru. After everything he'd done, his life was effectively over. And what would happen to Hinata once Hiashi realized that the person threatening his clan was just an 11-year-old boy? Despair overtook him at this thought, and Naruto hung his head, ready to give up. Kyuubi's voice rumbled, weak. Naruto raised his head. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. "What is your name?" Sarutobi inquired once more, believing that the man was speaking to him. "After all you've done, Mutt, I didn't expect you to fail here." Naruto had the impression that this was a derogatory term. Pathetic last dead. As he answered their question, rage boiled in Naruto's heart. "I'll tell you my name. I am a man who has fought 3 of the Mist's legendary swordsmen. Shukaku, I am the man who defeated the Ichibi." As he spoke, the amount of chakra that pushed into the machine increased as his determination and faith in himself grew as he remembered everything he had done. The images on the screen began to flicker. Zabuza raises his hands in preparation for his Kirigakure jutsu. Kisame, the Samahata slung over his shoulder. Raiga is engulfed in lightning. And Shukaku, the one-tailed Tanuki, who appeared to be fighting an unleashed Kyuubi. "I am the man who has fought against many Kekkei Genkei wielders and proven myself to be their equal. I am the man who has defeated Hyuten, Sharingan, Byakugan, and Crystal Jutsu wielders, to name a few. I am the man who fought the last Bone Pulse bloodline user. I am a man who has witnessed a fight involving all 3 Sannin. I am a man who has come to Orochimaru's lair in search of a friend. I've fought the snake Sannin 3 times and forced him to flee the battlefield once." Pain. Pain like Naruto had never felt before lashed out at him. Molten lead appeared to be poured into his marrow. His flesh was being ripped from his bones by red-hot hooks. However, it was not as painful as when he had the chakra required to travel back in time. Even that had not been as excruciating as when he had clutched Hinata's cool corpse to his chest and roared his agony to the heavens. Nothing could ever be that agonizing. Hiruzen remained motionless as image after image scrolled across the screen. Ice mirrors with an indistinct figure in the center, the Uchiha in the mask nearly receiving a Rasengan, a room full of unconscious Hyuga, a woman surrounded by a pink crystal dragon. He noticed his students fighting with their summons by their sides. There were several pictures of Orochimaru, the last of which showed him getting a powerful right cross right in the face, which made him smile. "I am the man who has encountered more S-class shinobi than most people have ever seen, and I am still alive. I've faced Itachi Uchiha, Kisame, the Biju without a tail, Sasori of the Red Sands, Deidara, the artist, Kakuzu of Waterfall, Orochimaru of the Sannin, and at least 9 others of lesser renown, and I've never risen higher than the rank of genin. I am the man who was eaten before defeating the Sanbi. The amount of chakra Naruto forced into the machine increased as the pain increased. The machine was beeping in warning by this point, and Anbu were running around, trying to figure out what was wrong. The drain that the machine would have on most people meant that Yurei could not be the source of the problem. Images of the faces mentioned by Yurei continued to appear. They were concerned when he mentioned S-class shinobi of lesser renown. A single S-rank shinobi can pose a threat to a village. The fact that they were not well known but still qualified for that ranking made them even more dangerous. Many people gaped when they saw a picture of a Sanbi with its head on fire. Naruto's voice rose as his chakra swirled around him and the machine began wailing a high-pitched alarm. I am a man who has stood up to the Shinigami and spoken to him as an equal. I am the man who has survived being stabbed by the Kusanagi, struck by the Raijin, and encased and crushed in hundreds of tons of rock. I am the man who has survived after opening all 8 celestial gates. I am the man who held the body of the woman he loves in his arms and nearly sold his soul to the Shinigami just to see her again. I am the man who has become a spirit, because thanks to my greatest jutsu, none of those I have spoken of will even remember my face. Jinchuriki is my name. Namikaze. I'm a Namikaze. There was a rumble as the machine detonated due to chakra overload, and the building shook as a massive thunderclap exploded outside. Yurei's chakra discharged in a solid wave all around him, knocking everyone in the room to the ground. Except for 2. Kaiten. Hiashi yelled as his chakra expanded into a dome around him, protecting him. Hiashi acted quickly after seeing that Yurei's chakra had broken the cuffs that had chained him to the chair. 128 palms. Yurei collapsed to the ground, dazed from his exertions and Haishi's attack. Thank you, Hiashi, the third said quietly as he took a step forward. It's incredible that he was able to overload the machine, Hiruzen commented quietly. Do you believe it was still operational? Hiashi inquired. Hiruzen gave a nod. I have no doubt about that, but to be able to erase the memories of so many ninja with a single jutsu? To survive, you must open all 8 gates. Hiruzen shrugged his shoulders. I can't let him go until I figure out who he is. But how do you keep him? He looked thoughtfully at Hiashi. Hiashi, I understand you've dabbled in Fuinjutsu. Do you have any that can at least limit his chakra? Hiashi slowly nodded. 1. The seal of the cage bird? Hiruzen inquired sharply. Hiashi raised his head. No, an Uzumaki seal, I say. How about it, Hinata? As he rubbed his hands together, Horinsa asked spitefully, the sparse light glinting off a gold ring on his right hand. Do you want to say anything? The gods will be furious with you, Horinsa, Hinata said quietly. Horinsa laughed. I'm going to take my chances. In 5, 4, 3, Hinata raised her hands above her head and shrugged almost casually. It's your call. She clapped her hands together as she said this. The heavens were split open as lightning struck the ground with a thunderclap, directly in front of Horinsa and perfectly in time with Hinata's clap. Gaw! Hinata yelled, pointing to the ground ahead of them. As thunder ripped through the air, another bolt of lightning tore into the ground where she had pointed, sending several Hyuga crashing to the ground. As lightning, the spears of heaven, fell in a sheet in front of them, countless streaks of burning energy tearing at the outdoor dojo at the edge of the garden, striking between Hinata and the elders. None of it touched the gardens, Hinata's favorite place. Rain pelted down, soaking everyone who was outside. Hinata raised her hands to the heavens in prayer, and the most powerful strike of all tore into the ground between Hinata and those who wished her harm, the bright light blinding them for a few seconds and sending them scurrying, sightlessly, for the cover provided by the buildings. They regained their sight just in time to see Hinata leap over the compound's wall. The wind caught her in midair and was strong enough to carry her 3 times the distance she intended to leap before gently landing on the ground. "Get here, Horensa yelled. As thunder rumbled overhead and lightning danced through the clouds, the wind howled in response, the force of it flattening anyone still outside to the ground, to the walls, rendering them unable to move. Every Hyuga present had the same thought running through their heads. First and foremost, you. Naruto softly groaned as he regained consciousness. He became aware, blearily, that his face was pressed against a stone floor and that he was alone in the room. As a result, he took the time to try to count the number of places where his aches and pains originated. He had lost count. "Can you please remind me why I didn't just send a shadow clone to do this job?" "You did it. Remember when it came to a halt for ramen?" Naruto exhaled a sigh. "Bless you, Ichiraku, and your enticing culinary arts." Shinigami shook his head. "Alright. No. Naruto exclaimed frantically, "I was only joking." Joking. He sat up and looked around. Naruto was imprisoned in a cell, a fairly large one at that, with a thick oak door and a small window covered in steel bars embedded deep within the wood. Naturally, he was unarmed, and oddly, one of his top's long arms, the left one, had been severely severed. A spiral, swirl-shaped seal appeared to be tattooed just below his shoulder on his arm. "You've got to be kidding. They tattooed my arm?" Shinigami raised his head. "It's not a tattoo, kid, it's a seal, though I think something went wrong with that seal." He quickly recounted what had occurred while Naruto was unconscious. Flashback. "Lord Hokage!" exclaimed one of the Anbu. Hiruzen addressed his subordinate. "Yes?" On one knee, the Anbu bowed to him. "The storm is too powerful for us to make it through safely. We'll have to wait until it passes." Sarutobi's eyes widened with surprise. Nonetheless, he had faith in his ANBU's judgment. "From here, we can make our way to the bottom level of the Anbu headquarters underground. As I recall, there is a nice cell there that I am sure Yurei will enjoy." The Anbu nodded and bowed his head to his superior. "Are you almost done, Lord Hiashi?" "Almost, Lord Hokage," the Hyuga Lord said quietly as he completed the seal he was painting on Yurei's arm. Hiashi pricked Yurei's other hand with a kunai and, holding the blade above the center of the seal, allowed a single drop of Yurei's blood to drip down into the seal network after completing the last, tiny character of the seal. "There. Fuin." Hiashi pushed himself back in surprise as the seal exploded with light, each of the many characters glowing a different shade of scarlet as they traveled up Yurei's hand, up his arm, making it appear as if his skin was on fire, before swirling around the top of his bicep and ending in a bright flash of white light. Hiashi stupidly blinked at the spiral, swirl-like seal that was the result of his work. Yurei's skin appeared to be covered in ink. It had also changed color, with a red swirl in the center surrounded by gold flecks. He tried the Fuinjutsu's unsealing technique cautiously, paling when it failed. "That's never happened before," he muttered to himself. End of flashback. Alright. So, Shinigami, what exactly does the seal do? Naruto inquired. "No idea," he cheerfully stated. Naruto moaned as he attempted to access his chakra. He swallowed, feeling sick when he realized such an act was impossible. "Boys," Naruto declared, "we're in big trouble." "You haven't heard half of it, sweetie," a voice purring with barely restrained malice said. The three residents of Naruto's mindscape turned to face a furious Arlia, who had just stepped through her menacing pink, flower, and heart-adorned door. Crap, they moaned. Arlia told them about the situation with Hinata after an efficient tongue-lashing and a promised beating that would be delivered when there were no impressionable young children around, a fact that Naruto was eternally grateful for, where Arlia berated them for being stupid enough to get caught and for not inviting her to come along with them. So, let me clarify, Naruto said slowly. Do I have 4.5 hours to break out of a maximum security prison? Yes. I'm getting past the entirety of Konoha's Anbu on their home turf. Affirmative. And don't forget about old man Hokage. Naturally. And then flee through a storm that is currently being powered by Susanoo? I'm glad you understand, Naruto-kun, Arlia said, smiling and flashing him a dimple. Most of the time, this would suffice, but Naruto had his eyes closed and was massaging his temples, attempting to will away the headache he was feeling. And if I don't, Hinata will most likely get the cage bird seal, he sighed. In which case, you'll have to do something about the Hyuga clan, Shinigami reasoned. After all, you did leave them with some impressive threats. Naruto grimaced and nodded. The problem is that I'm not sure I'll be able to follow through on them. I'm not sure if I can really be that cold. Yeah. Then stop moaning, Kit, and get us out of here right now. All you have to do now is run for freedom, Shinigami said cheerfully. Naruto's head shot up as an idea came to him as suddenly as a bolt of lightning out of nowhere. He quickly looked around. Flat, stone floor, no dust, a metal bed bolted to the wall, but with one sharp edge, the pacing footsteps of a guard outside. Judging by the heavy footsteps, it was a male, and, most importantly, the front door opened outwards. He twirled the Namikaze emblem between his fingers after removing it from the unharmed right sleeve of his jacket. I've got an idea, he chuckled. An insane idea that just might work. The single Anbu stationed outside Yurei's cell sighed in displeasure. What had he done to deserve such treatment? It was an entirely unnecessary task. The man was dangerous and a Jinchuriki, but he was in a cell that was notorious for being completely impenetrable. Even one of the Sannin was unable to escape from this prison. Needless to say, the ANBU's newest recruit found this quite boring. He was taken aback when he sensed the prisoner's faint stirrings of murderous intent. He shook his head. Killing intent did not require chakra to be produced in the first place. But the level of killing intent grew and grew until it became impossible to ignore. The Anbu shivered slightly and moved to the doorway, opening the window flap to check on the prisoner. He was taken aback to see Yurei sitting in a meditative position in the center of what appeared to be a summoning circle, but it was far more complicated than any he had ever seen. It was entirely made of blood, and the Anbu could see the blood-stained corner of the metal bed where Yurei had cut himself to paint the seals. What are you up to? He inquired. I'm summoning the Kyuubi, Yurei replied calmly, her eyes closed. You can't do that, exclaimed the Anbu. Keep an eye on me, Yurei retorted, never moving. His killing intent suddenly skyrocketed, reaching levels that his guard had never known in all his years, except when he faced Kyuubi. Was it his imagination, or was chakra, red chakra, swirling around his seated form? Despite his fear, the Anbu knew his duty and did not run for help, certain that the demon would be released before he could get anyone else to help him. The Anbu quickly wrenched open the door and was socked full force right in the nuts. The crunching sound of impact made Naruto wince. His clone was kneeling on the ground in front of the door, out of sight. When the Anbu yanked open the door, The clone surged upwards, concentrating all of his shoulder, legs, and weight in one devastating punch that landed squarely on target. The Anbu crumpled silently, thankfully unconscious. Naruto dragged him into the cell and placed him on the bed before exiting, taking great care to lock the door behind him. "I can't believe it worked," he exclaimed. "Of course it worked," exclaimed his clone. "We came up with it." Naruto nodded, acknowledging the point, before attempting to focus chakra on his hand, breathing a sigh of relief as a Rasengan appeared. Outside the cell, he could access his chakra, though there appeared to be far less of it than usual, less than a quarter in total. It took a lot out of him to blow up that machine, not to mention whatever Haishi's seal had done to him. "There will be no shadow clone spamming for you." Naruto slowly nodded. "Then I won't dispel this one," smirked his clone as it leapt at him and hanged back into the Namikaze emblem, which Naruto snagged from the air and carefully pinned back to his sleeve. "Now, which way out?" "Right now, there's only one path open to you," Shinigami observed dryly. "I recommend you take that." Naruto made it about 40 meters before being tackled to the ground by an Anbu on patrol. The Anbu had pinned Naruto to the ground with his wrist high up on his back before he could get to his feet. The chakra-enhanced grip felt like steel bars wrapped around his wrist, grinding the delicate bones together, and he could feel where the floor's raised surface dug painfully into his ribs. "Beware. Subject Yurei has escaped. Bottom floor, sector. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," yelled Naruto. The Anbu raised his head immediately, looking for the new, non-existent threat. As he did so, the distracted shinobi relaxed his grip on Naruto's wrist. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Naruto to move around. Big blunder. Although bolstering your limbs with chakra could grant you much greater strength, it would take you more than an instant to stick yourself to surfaces with chakra unless you had almost insanely high chakra control. That meant the Anbu was vulnerable right now. Naruto slithered out of his attacker's loosened grip, driving his newly freed elbow into the solar plexus of the Anbu as he did so. Naruto grabbed the front of the Anbu's shirt at the throat, twisted with the entire weight of his hunched body, and threw the Anbu off him and into the wall. Not to be outdone, the Anbu rolled to the ground, facing Naruto, but Naruto had followed after the Anbu he had thrown, and as the ferret-masked Anbu lifted his head, Naruto's kick was already halfway to the man's head. Naruto's sandaled foot landed in the Anbu's mouth, cracking the mask. A stunning blow that sent the Anbu reeling back. Naruto jumped forward as soon as he got his feet, thrusting his shoulder into the man's stomach. But he wasn't an Anbu for nothing, as evidenced by the double-fisted blow into Naruto's back and the right knee into his chest. But, with one knee off the ground, he had nothing to hold on to when Naruto hammered his left fist into the back of the ferret's left knee, his right shoulder still in the man's stomach. The Anbu fell onto Naruto's back as the leg crumpled. Surprised, Naruto abruptly straightened up, launching the Anbu headfirst into the hard rock floor. Naruto sent a mule kick behind him, straight into the Anbu's already abused belly, knowing the Anbu would use his arms to cushion the blow. When the blow knocked the Anbu onto his back, Naruto gave him a boot to the head, knocking him out cold. Was the previous one truly necessary? It was good, Kyuubi reflected. In my opinion, overkill is underrated. Naruto rolled his eyes, not surprised by Kyuubi's remark as he finished stripping the Anbu of his kunai and shuriken. He didn't have time to tie him up. Naruto stretched his back, blessing the strength of his layered henge as he did so. So far, the only thing he discovered that could break a 5-layered henge was a Rasengan, and if he got hit by one, he'd have much bigger problems to deal with. Keeping that many layers up had been difficult at first, but he had solved that problem with a relatively simple seal. It was some sort of recycling seal that simply kept the chakra moving in a circle, reducing the amount lost in the process. Naruto didn't understand everything about it, but he did know it was useful. He continued to run. 30 seconds later, Naruto rounded a corner and nearly collided with a special Jonin. He never considered anything, only acted instinctively. The Jonin grabbed Naruto's shirt and attempted to send a kunai into his leg. If he succeeded, Naruto would have already lost. Naruto slapped him and rocked back quickly. He held his 4 fingers together in a cup, his wrist loose. Although he still felt a line of fire from the kunai burn across his leg, the slap to the Jonin's ear created a loud echo that disoriented him for a crucial half-second. It was all over by then. Naruto immediately followed the slap with a powerful elbow strike to the head, knocking the Jonin's head to the side. A headbutt followed the elbow strike. Fortunately, the hit-8 was on the man's arm. Naruto moved in for the kill, sending a knee into the man's groin and another into his nose as he huddled in pain. Naruto thrust his low-powered Rasengan into the man's body, sending him flying into the wall, where his head whipped back, crunching against the rock and rendering him unconscious, even before slid down the wall and knocked the back of his head against the floor. As the skin closed in front of him, Naruto looked down at his leg, shaking his head in wonder. He was still getting used to his new healing factor. Naruto moved forward, rolling the limp man off his back and onto his side. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Arlia inquired. "Making sure he survives," Naruto replied. Shinigami responded for Naruto because Arlia did not understand. "The man's nose is broken. He's on his back, unconscious, and there's a chance he'll drown in his own blood. Not a pleasant way to go." Naruto's improved hearing picked up on the sounds of running feet. He had apparently attracted attention with his little brawl. He counted 4 individuals. Naruto flushed. He didn't like the sound of odds of 4 to 1. Naruto opened a door and ran soundlessly into a room, shaking out what appeared to be a sheet as he did so, cursing slightly to himself. Hiashi Hyuga was leading 3 Anbu when they discovered the downed special Jonin. Using his Byakugan, he informed the Anbu with him that the Jonin was alive, albeit unconscious. "I'll look after him," Hiashi said. "You keep looking for Yurei."
Hi, the Anbu confirmed as they spread out to find him, opening doors and scanning each room as they went.
Hiashi got up off his knees from where he had been ministering to the man on the ground and calmly walked into the room where Naruto was currently residing. "I know you're in here, Yurei," he said, turning and locking the door, Byakugan still activated as he shook his head from side to side, reducing his blind spot. "I see you," he said menacingly. "Then why did you send away the Anbu?" Naruto inquired, revealing himself and stuffing his camouflage cover sheet back into his pocket. Hiashi regarded him with a tilted head. "You reunited me and my daughter. Your methods were unorthodox, but they worked. I always have debts, Namikaze, and I owe you a great deal. You and Uzumaki-san, or Namikaze-san both, and your incarceration puts me in a very bad position to repay either of those debts. So, you're just going to let me go?" Naruto wondered. Hiashi smirked a little. "Not quite. I also owe you for the manner in which you brought us together. Good intentions or not, you made me believe that my clan was dead, and in here, you can't use any ninjutsu for fear of bringing the Anbu down on your head." Hiashi purposefully cracked his knuckles in both hands, before rolling his head in a manner that would have been more impressive if his hair had been longer. "I'm going to have a good time with this." Hiashi left the room with a sigh of contentment uncharacteristic of the Hyuga head. 4 minutes and 42 seconds later, Naruto counted. "Now we're even, Namikaze." Horinsa intends to seal Hinata with the cage bird seal, and he managed to blackmail your sealer Takashi into doing so by threatening his youngest daughter. Yurei's voice sounded mangled for some reason. Hiashi froze, his fists clenched so tightly that new blood began to flow from the open skin on his damaged knuckles. He specialized in the gentle fist, but there's something inexplicably satisfying about slamming your closed fist across the face of someone you've had a beef with. Hiashi snorted, remarking that it was odd how your attention wandered when you were in the grip of an icy rage. He turned his head to face the room's occupant once more. "It appears that I am once again in your debt, Namikaze-sama," he said, not questioning how Yurei could know something like this while imprisoned. "I will take care of it, but I would like to ask you one more favor," Hiashi said. Hiashi continued after seeing Yurei's arm twitch in agreement. "Naruto has been spending a lot of time with my daughter, and she frequently mentions him. Please convey the message that if he ever does anything inappropriate, or if he ever hurts her, I will make the light spar that you and I just had look like a love tap when I get my hands on him." Hiashi paused and turned around. "One more thing," his father said as his father's tri-pronged kunai landed about 2 inches from Naruto's face, with enough force to embed the first eighth of the blade within the stone floor. "I believe this is yours." Naruto gulped, still crumpled on the floor, almost unable to move after Hiashi had delivered the worst beatdown he had ever received. Except for the fact that he hadn't had a Chidori shoved into his chest this time, he'd had none. After Hiashi had left, Naruto's mind kept replaying his last threat, which was more of a statement of fact. "Fuzzbucket? Shinigami?" "Yeah?" replied the two immortals, Kyuubi reluctantly. "Remember when you said I'd understand why a father-in-law is higher up the food chain one day?" "Yeah? I think I get it now." Arlia was the only one who burst out laughing. "That reminds me, sweetie. I was just going through your interrogation memories when I came across something interesting. A man who has held the body of the woman he loves in his arms. Care to explain?" Naruto blushed, wishing his legs had enough feeling to allow him to return to Anbu-infested territory and thus avoid Arlia's teasing. Naruto was soon back in the corridor, looking for an exit with his kunai at the ready. He'd made one more stop before continuing. The special Jonin was carrying a small sealing kit. Naruto had spent time crafting a single, very specific sealing array out of kunai and wires. But it would be useless to him in this situation. When they arrived at AT Junction and had the option of turning right or straight ahead, Naruto carefully used his father's kunai as a mirror to look around the corner. It was a disaster. 2 Chunin and an Anbu stood guard at the right turn. While this indicated that he was on the right track, he had no idea how he would get past these 3. Naruto closed his eyes and drew on the air around him, attempting to become one with the wind. He tried, but he was completely unsuccessful. Shinigami responded to his unasked question. "You draw on the wind, Naruto. As I said, this is an internalized ninjutsu. In fact, the technique is the closest thing to turning yourself into an elemental possible. Right now, you're underground, surrounded by earth. There's no wind for you to feel, so you can't use the technique." Naruto cursed loudly and gently smacked his head against the wall, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Due to the bright lamp almost directly above him, he was forced to blink his eyes. A slow grin appeared on his face. "That might work," he muffled. Naruto quickly performed the 3 required hand signs. "Fuden. Kazutama Seisha," Naruto breathed in and out, twirling around to face the shinobi at the end of the corridor, positively pumping chakra into his hands. The Anbu gave a recognition shout before being hit in the face by a solid, yet blunt ball of air elating at just over 90 miles per hour. The Kazutama Seisha, or windball volley, was a simple but chakra-draining jutsu. It wasn't lethal. Instead, it formed balls of wind the size of baseballs and fired them from the user's palms. But it had two advantages: speed and numbers. Naruto could just keep shooting them in a volley because no time was spent sharpening the wind, making it highly reminiscent of automatic fire. He was currently firing 2 Kazutama every second from his right hand and 3 every 2 seconds from his left. Naruto continued to hose down the 3 ninja down the corridor, until the Anbu spat out a mouthful of mud, creating an earth wall for them to hide behind. Working together, the 2 Chunin unleashed a massive fire jutsu that blew through the wall and scorched anyone in the corridor. However, no one was present. Yurei spun around the corner, palms almost casually outstretched. His jutsu, however, struck the lamps that had lit the corridor with pinpoint accuracy, pitching them into darkness. They were hit several more times by Kazutama before the Anbu cracked a flare and sent it down the corridor, allowing them to see Yurei's retreating form down the corridor. When they discovered that Yurei had continued to destroy the light fittings on his way down, they immediately began the chase, using flares to light their way. Instead of breathing a sigh of relief, Naruto chuckled lightly as he undid the hinge that had disguised him as a piece of the wall's rubble, the Namikaze clan emblem missing from his shoulder. Naruto spat a globule of blood to the side, undoing the hinge that had been over his mouth. One of the rocks ricocheted around the corner and landed in his mouth. Thankfully, it would heal quickly. "So long, suckers!" Naruto yelled devilishly in their direction. He turned to continue his journey, only to be met with a shattered punch to the jaw that not only knocked him to the ground, but also sent him skidding along the ground for quite some time. Naruto groaned slightly and turned his head to see who had hit him. He looked up and up and up to see Asuma Sarutobi's bearded face. "Help me, suckers!" whimpered Naruto as Asuma assumed a ready stance, his knives already drawn. "You wouldn't be able to direct me to the restroom, would you?" Naruto, still on the ground, asked. Asuma simply laughed. "I didn't think so." Naruto jumped to his feet quickly, pulling out 4 kunai as he did so, prompting Asuma to take a short step back to give himself some breathing room if his opponent threw them. When Naruto threw a kunai into each corner of the rectangular corridor, 2 on the floor and 2 on the ceiling, the big man raised an eyebrow. The kunai dug deep into the stone, and each pair was connected to a single wire, forming an X shape in the middle of the corridor. Naruto grabbed both wires and muttered, "Fuin." Immediately, a transparent blue veil of chakra sealed the corridor, emanating in waves from each of the prepared kunai. Asuma gave a slight nod. "You first take out the lights to give you cover. The shadow clone leads the enemy away, using the same jutsu as you to further confuse them. Once they're out of the way, you release your genjutsu, get past their position, and then seal it off to prevent reinforcements from coming, while simultaneously guarding your back." To be honest, the only thing that came to mind was that I can see in the dark and they can't, Naruto admitted to Shinigami and company. But the sealing technique demonstrates that, whoever you are not a novice, and you streamed wind chakra into those kunai to get them so deep into the stone, so. Asuma's knives began to take on a distinct blue hue as he began to channel his own element into them. Naruto drew his father's kunai, causing Asuma to hesitate, and channeled his own wind element to the metal, making it nearly as long as his mother's sword. Shit, he thought before diving into the fray and colliding with Asuma halfway. Asuma immediately took control of the fight, causing rips and cuts in Naruto's clothes that welled up with blood. Within moments of a second clash, he had severed Naruto's leg, rendering him unable to move and dodge as effectively as before. Naruto threw a desperate double-handed overhead blow at Asuma, who caught it between his crossed blades. The 2 wind chakra blades collided, producing a high-pitched whine that grated on the ears. Asuma appeared dissatisfied. I expected more, he said, shaking his head slightly and peering between their blades at Naruto. Naruto punched him in the face. Asuma flinched in surprise as the spittle hit him in the eye. In that split second of indecision, Naruto flicked his left hand down, performing a Kazekin that cut deep into Asuma's right arm, just below the shoulder, and drove his knee into his thigh, supporting all of his weight on his ostensibly injured leg. Asuma exclaimed as he felt a spike drive into his leg, which appeared to have come from his opponent's greave. Naruto back flipped away from Asuma, revealing that he had healed from his earlier wounds, though he still favored his leg slightly. Don't underestimate me. True, most of my taijutsu will never hold against a master, and my blade work is pathetic, but what do you expect? I'm an overkill specialist. Either I take him out hard and fast, or I use an over-the-top jutsu to finish him. Problem is, most of my jutsu are lethal, and I don't want to kill any Konoha ninja. Asuma nodded, wondering if he should summon Kurenai and perform genjutsu on him. But doing so would be akin to admitting defeat. Fortunately for me, not all of my jutsu are unusable, and judging by how quickly you've been recovering, you should be able to take this, he said, forming 4 hand signs, albeit a little slower than usual, and shouting the name of his jutsu. Heizekisho, Kaiten. Asuma winced at the man's agonizing scream from within the cloud of burning ash. He hadn't been fighting him at his best. Attempting to capture was much more difficult than attempting to kill, so he didn't light the pile of ash. That's why, at the last second, he saw the kunai, infused with wind chakra and propelled by a Kazutama, shoot through the ash cloud. He tried desperately to get out of the way, but his leg would not support him. Although no arteries had been severed, the stab had struck a thick muscle cord. Asuma stumbled, and the kunai cut into his flesh, some of its venom blunted by Asuma's hastily fashioned wind blades. However, it had pierced his stomach and severed an artery. The big man was bleeding profusely and would most likely die within 7 minutes. Naruto limped out of the smoke, puzzled as to why Asuma had not attacked again. When he emerged from the ash cloud, he saw his crumpled form on the ground. Shit. He yelled as he dashed over to the man who would become the sensei of the next Ino Shika-cho team, immediately applying pressure to the wound. As he did so, the world around him began to shift. Kurenai-san, Naruto struggled to stay focused on the task at hand. I recommend that you release that genjutsu and assist me in treating Asuma's wounds before he bleeds to death. Kurenai advanced, her jutsu inactive. Despite her reservations about this man, she couldn't help but rush to Asuma's aid. Keep the pressure on the wound, yelled Yurei. Yurei let go of Kurenai's hands and cut into his blackened jacket, pulling out a small bottle of red pills. What are you doing? Kurenai demanded emphatically. Keeping him alive, the Namikaze said as he shoved 3 pills into Asuma's mouth, massaging his throat and making sure he swallowed. Here, use this, he said, handing Kurenai a towel. The kunoichi blinked at the fluffy object, not having seen him henge it into existence, but grabbed it and pressed it against Asuma's stomach. You're not going to get away with this, you know, Kurenai said abruptly. I'll drive you out. Yurei laughed. Is it just me, or are you admitting that you have feelings for Sarutobi here? Yurei reached forward and jerked the kunai out of Asuma's stomach in a single, harsh motion, unplugging the hole created by the knife and allowing blood to flow more freely. Try to stop me, and your boyfriend will bleed to death, he said as he turned and ran. Kurenai's cry of he'd waited until he could see Asuma's healing improve to a level comparable to his own, thanks to the pills made from his own blood that he'd given him before pulling out the knife. If he hadn't, Asuma wouldn't have been able to heal completely, Uzumaki blood or no. Naruto suspected that the newly healed flesh could have pushed out the blade, but he wasn't willing to take the risk. There was no doubt that Asuma would survive. This thought comforted him as he turned the final corner and came to a halt in front of 4 Anbu and the Hokage himself. That's not right. There's an empty space above you, kid. End of the line, Yurei. Give yourself up, Hiruzen said gently, but there was an iron command beneath the gentleness. Yurei stood there staring at the ground, his hands clenched into fists on either side of his body. His hands suddenly opened, revealing a swirling gem of pure white chakra in each palm, bright enough in the dark tunnel to blind the shinobi ahead of them. He threw both of them in front of him as one, forming a veritable wall of deadly wind. Naruto wasted no time in performing 3 Kazeken and a Kazebo to cut a triangle into the ceiling above him and blow the stone out of the hole, jumping through it while scraping himself. He entered an empty room. No windows and a heavy door. Up, kid, up. The ceiling's too thick to cut through. You'll need something bigger. Naruto nodded and formed a Kage Bunshin, and by joining their hands, an Odama Rasengan was created. Naruto had expended half of his remaining chakra on this. His clone performed as many Kazeken with its own chakra as it could, weakening the ceiling, but a kunai came through the hole and struck it dead center, dispelling it when it had just under half of its chakra remaining. Time to go. Naruto exclaimed, holding the beefed-up Rasengan above his head. The ceiling could just as easily have been cobwebs. Naruto plowed through the roof 3 floors up, facing the full fury and might of the storm. He lay on the roof of the Hokage Tower, close to chakra exhaustion, with the entire building and its occupants below him in disarray. Naruto lay on his back, the storm surrounding him, panting for breath that would not come. He struggled to his feet, turning onto his side and feeling the wind all around him. But the storm had subsided, and many shinobi were outside now, bracing themselves to face him. I thought you said it was too dangerous to go outside because of the storm. Arlia swore. It appears that Susanoo recognizes you. He is interested in how you handle yourself. Now? Yelled Naruto. Yes, right now. Naruto resisted the urge to blaspheme and closed his eyes to feel. He could feel the air currents all around him, the rain lashing against his face, and he could pinpoint the precise points in the atmosphere around him where the smallest touch would have the greatest impact. As the shinobi below him attempted to ascend, Naruto directed his chakra to 4 specific points in the air in the form of a Kazutama, which exploded precisely when he said. The air immediately formed a wall around him, swirling at the speed of a tornado, with him in the center. For a brief moment, Naruto thought he was safe, until the Anbu burst through the roof and surrounded him. Their captain took in the situation before turning to face the exhausted Yurei. Lethal force is authorized. In a panic, Naruto drew on the wind, drawing deep as if thirsting for it. Even as the Anbu began their hand signs for the jutsu that would end his life, he could hear the Shinigami shouting at him to stop, almost as if it were in the background, but it didn't matter. This was so much easier than the last time he drew on the wind. And the world changed for him. Everything slowed to a crawl, while he moved at seemingly normal speeds, borrowing the speed of the wind itself. Why shouldn't he be able to sense everything around him? He had, after all, become a part of the wind. Jutsu rained down on him from every anbu, but he was prepared. Naruto bent the air to his will and held a staff made of pure, solid wind in his hand. The first jutsu hurled a bolt of lightning at him. Naruto blocked it with his staff, absorbing it and containing the lightning within his staff. When the three anbu finished their jutsu, a boulder of earth shot forward at him, while the others both used Suiryuden. Ignoring the water dragons, Naruto slammed his staff against the ground, using it to lever himself into a vertical kick that sent a wind blade slicing through the boulder. Naruto threw his staff into the thin line provided by his Kazekin like a javelin, with a small cry of exertion. The wind and lightning-enhanced staff bore effortlessly through the rock until it reached its center, where it detonated in a wind chakra explosion, pushing the two halves of the boulder apart. Naruto stood tall, his arms crossed across his chest, palms facing each other. He felt no fear as the boulder's two halves passed by on his left and right sides, and when the time was right, he used a single Kazutama from each hand. The storm's strength was enough to send each half of the boulder rocketing away from him. The earth smashed through the water dragons while still having enough force to hit the anbu who had cast the jutsu, sending them flying towards the tornado's wall. Naruto made a casual gesture, and each of the anbu flew through a sudden opening in the wind wall, but the boulder that followed was cut so finely that it resembled dust. Unfortunately, his act of mercy left him vulnerable to the following jutsu, Akaze no Yaiba. After all, why would the wind hurt itself? It tickled his skin in a loving caress. Karyuden! Exclaimed Kaden. Naruto could see the dragon of fire approaching him, down to the smallest detail. He grinned. Wind direction. Void. To burn, fire requires three things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. When one of those three is removed, the fire is extinguished. This jutsu created a space in which there was no wind and no oxygen. But, as one with the wind itself, Naruto is capable of far more. Instead of haphazardly moving the air, he condensed it all into a small column that curved around his body. When the fire struck the void shield, it followed that column, shooting out at the lightning user and sending him flying through the wind wall. Naruto let go of the jutsu, and the wind rushed in to fill the void. He spun the wind around himself and sent it at the wind user, followed by a Kazutama. The two wind forces were successful in removing him from the fight. Naruto could see the sharp tips of stone rising slowly, slowly from the ground as the earth user slammed his hands onto the ground. He jumped up, almost apathetically, the wind catching at him, another staff in his hand. Naruto strained his chakra reserves by drawing the wind close to his staff, causing it to swirl around. Swirling and condensing, swirling and condensing, swirling and condensing until even he felt some pain holding on to it. As he returned to earth, he raised it above his head and drove it into the ground with a shout. The wind blew in all directions, destroying the stone spikes in a wave. The anbu had no chance to avoid the wind wave and were flung from the tower roof like flies in the wind as the wind ripped through the tornado-like wall, dispelling it. Naruto knelt on one knee on the ground, not daring to let go of the wind, which was the only thing keeping him alive right now. When he felt a tremor in the ground beneath him, he lifted his head to see the third Hokage rise effortlessly from the stone floor. "Oh, come on," he grumbled. Hiruzen simply looked around, taking in the devastation. His head shook. "What brought you to me?" Naruto's eyes blinked. "Please excuse me?" The Hokage simply shrugged. "You obviously don't want to be tied down. We didn't know anything about you, and yet you came to me alone. What was your reason?" Naruto licked his bottom lip. "Promise me you'll give Naruto the sword," he said abruptly. The old man's brows were knitted together. It was his mother's, he admitted softly, the realization sinking in. Granted. On his graduation day, I discovered information about Orochimaru, the new leader of Sound, and his plans to invade Konoha. The Hokage took a deep breath in. When? In the final hour, when the playful war comes to the leaf, the snake will strike. Hiruzen cocked his chin. Thank you, he said, looking up to see Yurei walk away. Hiruzen sighed, admiring his perseverance grudgingly. I can't just let you go, he said, raising his hands to cast a jutsu. Yurei smirked at him, his back to the ledge of the roof. I'm a ghost, remember, what does not exist cannot disappear, he said as he let himself fall off the roof, his arms spread wide. Hiruzen dashed to the edge and looked down, only to find nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished, as if he had ceased to exist, with the storm obscuring any trace of him. An Anbu approached Hiruzen. Do you want me to send out search parties, Lord Hokage? Slowly, Sarutobi shook his head. Don't bother. He doesn't mean us any harm, and we won't find him anyway. Get me Iruka in the upcoming Jonin Sensei. You'll find Kakashi in a hospital ward with Guy and Wolf. Tell Iruka that he is to prepare a graduation exam for next week. If what Yurei says is true, the fresh genin will need all the training they can get. Except for two, the members of the Rookie Nine slept soundly in their beds. While one slept in the bed of the one she had loved for many years, the other struggled to reach safety. Everyone was unaware that the world they had been given had been irreversibly altered by a few words. Will it be for the better or for worse? Arlia wondered. The storm continued to rage outside.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.